Welcome to the Hands-On Business Podcast. Delighted to be with you again. As always, before I start, just want to remind everybody that if you like what you hear, please rate the podcast with the link that will be in the description below this. And if you don't enjoy it, please keep it to yourself. Right, so what I decided to do, I did it in the first time, the last podcast, I decided at the beginning of each episode, I'm going to read out a review of this podcast. So hopefully it gives you a taste of what you're in for if you haven't listened before. So today we have a review from Jag, who gives us a 4-star rating. I'm gonna have to speak to him and find out why it wasn't 5 stars, but 4 stars isn't bad. And he says, hands-on business podcasts are short, sharp, top tips in sharpening your sales, marketing, team culture, and leadership skills, to name but a few. And he obviously has named quite a few actually there. What a really useful updates as we continue to work and live in ever evolving and changing work environments. So that's Jag, and thank you very much. We'll try our very, very best to keep that up. So appreciate that. So, but for now, on today's podcast guest, delighted to be joined by Leanne Elich, who is a graduate of the University of Sydney, also Harvard Business School and Harvard Medical School. So as one of Australia's most successful medical technology business executives and leading expert in high performance sales team, Leanne is a psychology-driven business strategist, and not just a business strategist. So we're going to get into that most definitely. But she's got global experience and is the creator of the Business Mastermind program and the successful periodic table of sales. And we were just talking about that offline because I'm a chemist. So I was really attracted to that. And that's how we connected on LinkedIn, because Leanne posted about the periodic table and I was immediately drawn to it. So we then started communicating, and that's how this came about. So we're going to get into that. So based on her own success, Leanne is using what she's learned and her established methodologies to teach businesses how to think differently, create value, and set a pathway for industry leadership. So welcome, Leanne.
Thank you, Hakeem. Thank you very much. Great to be here from sunny Sydney. It is sunny outside.
I wish I could say the same. We're in, I'm not, well, my children call it miserable Manchester, but actually today I think it's 26 degrees and it is actually quite sunny. So they're going to have to probably rename it for the next few days, because I think it's allegedly supposed to be really an Indian summer, as we call it, but we seem to have it every September. August is always terrible, and now September is really great. So yeah, sunny here as well. So thank you for joining us, Leanne. And the subject for today's podcast, it's going to be quite topical, because obviously we all know for the last 18 months the world has changed, and so has business. So with many people moving to remote working environments, we're going to be exploring communication in business. So before we get into the actual meat of the topic, just tell me a bit more about your background and your journey to where you are now.
Yeah, sure. So I have a bit of an unusual background, to be honest. So I'm actually an oncologist. So my background is in medicine. Worked in 2 major hospitals in Australia, teaching hospitals, and did a lot of paediatric oncology. So that's little kiddies with cancer. And for about 10 years, I was clinical, and out of sheer frustration, really, I decided that there was more to just being a clinician and trying to do the best for your patients. And I actually got headhunted from a medical devices company. And besides friends and family thinking I was absolutely crazy, I saw this as a fantastic opportunity to do a lot more for patients, improve patient outcomes, especially the little guys, in terms of building sort of a business network, global pathways, getting my name out there, building relationships and saying, hey, we need help. We need this information, this specific medical device, the expertise that you have, and we want it in Australasia so we can actually start implementing these new technologies in a safe environment, and off we go from there. So I was on an absolute mission to connect with medical businesses and quite high profile principals globally to explain exactly, what my background was as, scientific and medical, and say, look, I'm going to use that expertise to then, broaden that to a lot of other people. I really wanted to touch a lot more people's sort of hearts. And that I put frameworks in place, and that's exactly what I did for about 17 years. So we were able to implement a lot of new technology into Australasia, a lot of robotic radiotherapy. So with that, I came the sales experience, came strategic experience, came working with teams, operations, finance, the whole gamut of the business acumen skills that you need. And it's almost, and we all find ourselves, I believe, in some respect as an accidental salesperson, because every person really does sell. Selling isn't just a transaction. It's not just a transfer of money. It can be a transfer of knowledge, value, opinion. If I'm talking to you, Hakeem, and I'm trying to get you to think the way that I'm thinking, and trying to politely persuade you to change your mind or to change your view, that is still selling. So for me, being able to put that framework in place and then implement this phenomenal technology, then went the training, then went the teamwork. I then lectured and educated at some of the major universities in Australia, in New Zealand, and also in Southeast Asia. And from that, it just grew. And my love of the business environment, in the healthcare system, was, and to this day, it's my absolute love. And from that, I created my own advisory and consultancy firm. However, my sales and strategic outcomes with my clients are all scientific based.
Okay, and that's a fascinating, almost counterintuitive journey, because and I'm saying that because most people would say, well, you're a doctor, you're an oncologist, surely that must have more impact on the health of the nation than going into business and doing medtech. But the way you've explained it is actually, well, no, because you've got that background, you could attract those people, and understanding what was required in that healthcare space allowed you to actually target the right people to bring in the right sort of technology.
That's right. And also, I only have the tools at my disposal that the organization or the institution I'm working at has. And that was, sort of the beginning of my frustration. Plus, it was just that group of patients, or group of patients, myself and my colleagues, that we were actually helping. Where when you branch out into medical devices or into med tech, and then expand that, bringing in technologies that wouldn't be there, you're actually helping a lot more people. So
Yeah.
that was my thinking behind it, was, as much as I love my patients and I love working with patients, that I can help and increase patient outcomes nationally, not just in one sector or one
Yeah.
area of healthcare. And that was really important, and that's what drove me to do it. It was a steep learning curve, absolutely, but it's something that, I mean, I'm always up for a challenge, and I always like to be mentally stimulated. For me, it was always going to work. I was always going to make sure it worked. I was on a mission. I had this plan. I had these goals, the ambition, the drive. This is what I wanted to do, and no matter what I needed to do, I was going to make it happen. Whether it took, a short period of time or a long period of time, I was going to get the resources, the team, the knowledge, the expertise around me to be able to do it. And that's sort of how I initially sort of fell into the medical business, and have never looked back.
And obviously, you said right at the beginning of that journey, your friend, your family thought you were crazy. And now that you've made success of it, do they still think you're crazy? Do they still try and convince you to go back to medicine, or are they thinking, oh no, she knows what she's doing now?
No, they're okay now. They're okay now. I mean, even but it took a while. It really
Hmm.
did, because even during the transition, and in Australia, not a lot, because this was about 20 years ago, no one really did that. You stayed in your pocket. You
Yeah.
stayed playing in your sandpit. If you were a clinician at a hospital, you stayed there, and you did, you did phenomenal work, but that's your play area. So no one, as they call it, going to the dark side. And I was, I was still to this day, I get people saying, "Oh, you went over to the dark side." Um, but for me, I didn't look at it that way. I just looked at it as an opportunity, and no one had done it. Yeah, it was a massive risk. I didn't have anyone to ask. I didn't know what to expect. I was lucky that the devices company, the medtech company that headhunted me, were a fantastic group. They were also in the dark as well, because this was something new for them as from in an industry perspective and commercial perspective. No one really did this, so we were supporting one another and in it together. So as I sort of got a lot of success, and I'm not just talking about my own success, I'm talking about the success of the business, the success of the hospitals, the success of, the healthcare system, and ultimately the success and the health and well-being of the patients. As that was happening, I mean, how do you look back? So people will still say, and friends will still say, and family, my mum in particular, will say, "Gosh, I was so worried that you were making the wrong decision because we could not see your vision." And now they truly understand.
It's interesting because I'm assuming there's not that many doctors that take that path, or are there more now because you've done it, or is it still pretty much stay in your
There
lane?
is a Yeah, there's a couple. There's probably as clinicians, there's a lot of sort of allied health workers that may transition into the commercial world, but clinicians, not really. There's probably about half a dozen in the country.
All right, so yeah, so it's not it's not really changed much over that
No.
period of time,
So we're quite sought after. That's for
well, no,
sure.
and I was thinking about that because it's quite forward thinking of that medtech company because it wasn't
Yeah.
something that people did. So to actually approach a doctor, most companies would have thought, oh well, no, they won't be interested. So it's actually quite a forward thinking way of doing things. So is there anything that you think in terms of your medical training, what you were doing as an oncologist, actually prepared you for business once you got into business that actually made you successful?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, the one thing that is so important that people get so wrong a lot of the time is communication in business. And for me, having the communication with patients that are extremely unwell, having to communicate bad news, having to communicate to not just a patient but to family, to friends, especially when you're working with children. That is a very different beast of the support network around the child, and then trying to sort of explain to the child what's happening. So for me, that the way of communicating and understanding the depths of subliminal cues, reactions, emotions. There's a lot of empathy. I mean, empathy is number one in sales. It should be number one in sales. There's a lot of empathy in when you're dealing in in healthcare and in the medical field. Using that, and that really prepared me, because things don't always in business go the right way, and there's a lot of a lot of ruthless decisions and egos and power trips that you need to deal with. And these are just people that are, whether they're have their own securities or whatever it is, but it comes across as extremely intimidating to a lot of people. And those kinds of skills prepare you for those, really uncomfortable and awkward situations. The other thing too is what we don't realize, that when we are talking to a patient or talking to another healthcare worker, if I've created a program or I have a protocol of the way that I want to treat a patient or deliver radiation to a patient, I need buy-in from the patient and from the patient's family to say, yeah, okay, I'm happy with that. If that's a sales process, even though I know it sounds bad, but it is. I know there's a lot of emotion in it, and patients look up to you and say, well, you're the expert. I will, follow what you say, or I will, be guided by you. And we have a duty of care to provide the best solution that is suitable for them. But patients and people have their right to say no. Just like in sales, I have a right to say no, I don't want that, or no, the decision is no. They have a right to say no as much as they have a right to say yes. So I need to put almost so to speak, a compelling value proposition to them to say, yep, I'm okay with that. Yep, I'm going ahead with that. You've got my buy-in, or essentially in a commercial sales perspective, yep, I'll work with you. Yep, I'll buy that. Yep, let's start the contract. Let's start the relationship, and off we go. So there are a lot of synergies.
I've never actually thought about that, but as you started to talk about it, you think, okay, yeah, so it's about connection, it's about empathy, it's about listening, it's about getting people's buy-in, which is, as you said, all sales. And you know, anyone who's got kids knows that that children are probably the best salespeople, and they know how to tug on your heartstrings when they require, how to convince you that they know that they'll die if they don't get X, Y, and Z, and then they pester you for ages. So they're consistent. So was there a challenge, because obviously one of the things you mentioned there is that obviously in that environment of a doctor, you're seen as an expert, and then we just talked about people thinking you've gone over to the dark side. So even though you may be an expert, people don't respect salespeople the same as they do doctors, which is obviously one of the reasons why your friends and family thought, oh my god, what have you done? So how did you deal with that transition?
Yeah, and that's the stigma with sales. The trickery, the underhandedness that people associate sales with. I mean, I've always said it's sales, not sleaze. It's where you people think of it as quite often as slimy, sleazy occupation, but it's not. But what you need. Sales, to be successful, you need to have authority. So you need to know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So I never saw it as I am a salesperson and you are a customer. I saw it as I have a solution that will help you solve a problem. Let's work at this together. So it's not about me, it's about the customer. So what can I do to help them solve a problem? Selling or decision making, basically, there's two components. There's emotion and logic. Really, when anyone makes a decision in any way, shape, or form, it's emotion and logic. So one is that I need to solve a problem, or I need to sort something out that's causing me grief. And the other with emotion is that it makes me happy or puts me in a good mood. I feel good. So they're the two really important principles, psychological principles of how you then engage with a customer. So it was all relationship building. It was all behavioral selling. It was never, I have something that I think you'd be interested in. It's, what are your issues? What are your problems? What can I help with? I may have something that will make it easier for you or more efficient or more streamlined. Let's sit down, brainstorm, work on it together and see if we can come up with a solution. So it's that communication, it's that trust with one another, and having that expertise of the medicine and science, and then saying, look, I want to share my knowledge with you to see if we can solve a problem. That's how you get away from that salesy, you're just trying to sell me something attitude, because I wasn't just trying to sell something, I'm actually trying to help someone solve a problem. So authority and patience and persistence, and authenticity as well. You have to definitely build that trust. That's really important. Being the type of person that I am, and my actual personality traits and my profile, which I talk a lot in my workshops. I'm a talker. I have the background of caring, of having that empathy. I use those skills that made me successful as a clinician in the sales environment. I treat it exactly the same. Okay, not that the customer is a patient, but they have a problem that needs to be solved.
Uh, as I said, I've never thought about it, and that's why I was fascinated by the way you talk around the process, because I think the fact that you are a clinician gives you a unique perspective on something, a very interesting perspective. So, and that probably leads on to, we've seen lots of people who call themselves business strategists to a great or lesser extent, but you call yourself a psychologically based business strategist. So just talk to me a bit more about that.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I've been studying behaviors well, since university. I'm not a clinical psychologist, but obviously as part of, medical school, you do psychology. Um, and it's always been a fascinating topic to me, the way that we behave, the patterns that we fall into subconsciously and naturally, and just observing people's behaviors. And this is also stems from when you're working with terminally ill patients. You need to be really in tune, and almost have a sixth sense of how they're going to react. So, and then sort of understanding and interpreting it in the right way. The same thing, exactly the same thing happens in business. So, for instance, if I'm talking to someone that is quite a dominant person, or and there's a personality trait and archetypes. There are frameworks that I've always used in my business career that I use now, that are just, yeah, again, fascinating. And I've used a lot of psychometric instrumentation and a lot of, those kind of practices and assessments. And there are a lot out there. A lot of them are old. A lot of them aren't evidence-based. Again, being, scientific, everything for me is going to be fact and evidence-based.
Yeah.
And, provide answers that are logical and not just fluff. I'm not really a fluffy person at all. Fluff just doesn't sit with me because it's not, in a way, real. So it's being able to understand the person you're speaking to. So if there is a dominant person, someone that is very time poor, someone that is very direct, very assertive, and this happens a lot in sales. If I'm to sit down and have a meeting, or I'm to sit down to talk about a product, or even to strategize with them, if I start becoming extremely verbose and hand them a manual or a brochure that's 100 pages, they're going to look at it and go, what on earth do you want me to do with this? Give me the one-page summary.
Yeah.
Yet there are other people that have the personality traits that are a lot more calm. They're called compliant and steady, where you give them the 100-page manual and they're lapping it up. That's exactly the information that they need. And if I gave them a one-pager, it would be, turn it around going, well, where's the rest of it?
Yeah.
So being able to identify those behaviors and identifying the patterns that people exhibit, and it's, again, innate. Like we are who we are. We can change our patterns, and what happens with our personality traits is they do change, but the dominance stays where it is. And the influence stays where it is, and the steadiness stays where it is, and the compliance stays where it is, but there may be different levels as we experience things through life. So being able to use those skills, those personality traits, and then I can extend that into archetypes, we can then connect on a much deeper level. We engage with people in general, let alone our customers, on a much deeper level, and we build relationships that are actually sustainable. So it's, think about it yourself. If you've got someone talking to you or sending you an email, because I go into, email delivery, conversational delivery, or conversational intelligence, as I call it, personality intelligence. If you are a certain way and someone just, automatically, because a lot of automation that's happening now in our digital and virtual world, especially since COVID, and they just throw information at you. And it's like, well, you haven't put any thought in that. That doesn't resonate with me. You've just sent that to me. You're unlikely to. You've got to manage your time. It's almost like a metrics. It's like, what deserves my attention? Which part of this communication from all these people have sent me information, which one deserves my time? Because my time is extremely important, and I'm busy and I haven't got time to look at all this.
Yeah.
Someone that has actually looked at and identified the way that I am and have said, well, Leanne's a friendly person, so I'm going to start an email saying, hi, how are you? Or how's your day been? Or hope you're keeping well. They've put the time in to know that that's how I respond, and I am more likely to be drawn to that and then to respond and build up a relationship or a business relationship with them. People underestimate the importance of, and we don't even have to go deep, even just the superficial personality traits. We all think that everyone wants to communicate and everyone behaves in the same way we do. Neuroscience, psychology, real world experiences show us that that is simply not true. I have seen business deals, relationships, sales absolutely crumble and dissolve based just on people not understanding one another, and they haven't taken the time to work out how they need to communicate.
You've effectively just defined almost the art of communication, haven't you, in terms of connecting with people and actually listening, which lots of people don't do. I can't remember, I saw a quote the other day where it was effectively saying that, some people listen because they want to understand, and other people listen because they're just waiting to reply.
I call that hearing.
Yes.
Listening is very different to hearing. When you listen, you not only use your ears, but you actually use your eyes and your body language, because you engage, because you're actually interested in what someone is saying and you're giving them the respect to speak. So just using your ears and hearing is absolutely not the same thing as listening. Yeah.
I agree. So just as a little test, because obviously you probably get, I don't know how many emails you'll get requesting to do things, and obviously you got an email from me. I didn't know you. So what was it in my email that you thought, I think it was on LinkedIn actually, wasn't it, the first connection? What did I say? Because I can't remember exactly what I said, but what did I say there that made you think, actually I will respond to this one? Because I'm the same. I get lots of stuff and I don't respond to everybody.
Yep, absolutely. So your email or your message, you had clearly taken the time to look at something about me. Now, whether it was my profile, whether you read my post and understood the post, there was a clear indication that you wanted to know more about me. Again, you're coming to me, so it's not about you, it's about me. And as I was reading it, that resonated with me because it's like not a standard automated email. It was something that was applicable to me, and you had taken the time to. Now, it can only be a small thing. It doesn't have to be a big thing. It can be a tiny, tiny thing. Also, you asked permission. So you actually, if you reread it, the way that you wrote it, it wasn't, I'm going to say, let's organize a it's not, it was more, let's, explore whether there's synergies, or let's explore. It was an open invitation, and you were asking permission about whether it was okay to connect, rather than bombarding me, which is what I get a lot of the time with, I sell this, I do this, here's a link, book a meeting.
Yeah.
No, thank you. I'm not interested in booking a meeting with you, because there is nothing in that message or in that email where that even resonates with me. You could send that to 100 people and it'd be exactly the same, and 100 people are different. Every single 100 people, there'll be 100 different people would expect 100, well, so to speak, 100 different emails.
Yeah.
You're not going to send 100 different emails, but we've all got our own different sort of personality traits. But we break it down into 4. We break it down into quarters. So if people are listening, going, "Oh my gosh, that's it's not that." We do sort of collate it together. But yeah, that taking that time, now it would have been a couple of minutes to actually understand what I do, to understand where my expertise is, and then bring that into the conversation or into the response when you are communicating with me. That gave me an indication that this person is interested in what I do, is interested in my expertise, and actually is asking permission for me to speak to them. And yeah, so it was perfect.
Oh, excellent. So that brings me, and it's not, well, it is about communication because it's all about sales, onto the actual reason I did contact you, which was the periodic table of sales, and we were talking about that before. So do you want to just give me give us a bit more information, because I find it, as I said, as a chemist, I find it absolutely brilliant to actually build a sales model around the periodic table. And as I said to you earlier, I'm just disappointed that I didn't think about it myself. But so tell us about it, because it's brilliant.
Happy to share. Happy to share it. Yeah, yes. So the periodic table. I mean, yes, the periodic table. The traditional and standard periodic table is the periodic table of chemical elements, and that is the building blocks and makeup of every single atom, every single thing that is here on Earth and beyond, really. Basically, it's a building block. So I have used the periodic table for a long time during my career. As well, because I've worked with a lot of medical oncologists that are, chemotherapy specialists. So when we start talking about drugs and start talking about sort of molecular activity. I've also done genetics at Harvard Business School, so we go into biologics and therapeutics as well. So for me, that's sort of been a main part of, the beginning of my career. What people don't understand is that even in business, we have building blocks, and building blocks have to start from the bottom. You have a component of one thing, you have a component of another, and you may have a little bit of this, and you may have 2 or 3 molecules of that, and you create influence, or you create a pathway to be able to prospect or to develop skills. So basically, I broke down what happens as a business generalist when you are either in business because you're an expert in business, or an accidental salesperson or accidental business person. And I broke down all the components that are needed to be successful in the business world today. So even though it's the business world from, a long time ago, things have changed dramatically now, and the way we need to behave and the way we need to approach customers and approach stakeholders is very different. So I broke it down into building blocks, and that's where I came up with the 21 elements. So the 21 elements of the periodic table of sales are broken into 3 groups. And the first group is your mindset, and the second group is your skill set, and the third set is your toolkit. So your mindset, there are 9 elements in your mindset. So and in my book, each chapter is one of the elements where you need to be in a certain frame of mind. You need to develop your own skills. You need to understand what business is all about. You need to, overcome challenges, try and push through reluctance. And this is not again, a fluffy, feel good kind of, the mindset. This is essentially what a successful business person needs, and how they need to position themselves and their mindset to be able to move forward and create success. So it's what you need and the way that you need to present yourself to the world. We then go on to the second, which is skill set. And there's 8 elements in the skill set. And that's the skills that you acquire to do selling, to sell, and to understand the science of selling. So that's when we come into your sort of typical, but a lot of sort of standard words of prospecting, negotiating, closing. Storytelling is in there, business acumen, leadership, change management. I mean, now I'm not talking about the full change management of an organization, but this is the managing the change of an opinion and how you do that. And you need to have those skills to be able to encourage someone or persuade someone to change their mind or to think the way that you're thinking. Then the third is toolkit. And there is 4 elements in toolkit, and your toolkit is basically your metrics, your strategy, your leadership, your influence, how all the resources and the tools and skills that you need to be able to execute it. So you're in the right frame of mind. You've developed and become an expert and perfected your skills. That's great, but then you need to execute it. And how do you do that? So then you've got your tools. So we're talking about doing different analyses, your forecasts, your mind mapping, goal setting. There's a lot habit tracking. I've got habit tracking in there because we quite easily fall out of sales habits, especially prospecting. Not everyone likes to prospect. So if they don't set a habit, they actually won't do it. So there's about 13, 14 different tools that we use as strategists and successful salespeople, and that's part of the toolkit. So then I thought to myself, that is the breakdown of the periodic table. And as I was saying to you before we went live, I wanted to create an equation because it's scientific. The periodic table is scientific. So let me create a sales equation and a framework or a model that anyone can use. And that is basically that you've got your mindset plus your skill set times your toolkit equals influence squared. So it's not just that all these things give you influence, it's actually that you exponentially amplify influence if you use this framework in the way that it's meant to be used.
Yeah, absolutely brilliant. As I said, I only wish I'd thought about it. And actually, when I read it, I kept thinking, because obviously I've got my sales acceleration formula. I'm thinking, how can I put that into some kind of equation? I couldn't do it. So yeah, I haven't got the skills set that I need to do that.
Not yet.
Not yet, but obviously once as I was thinking, there's quite a few people that I'm going to pass that book on to. I've got a sales team that actually will benefit because I've just been speaking to them recently about reading more and learning more and actually never standing still, because that's one of the key things I think in sales. People get to a point and think, oh, I'm a great salesperson and that's it. And I think the best not just best salespeople, the most successful people are constantly learning and trying to adapt and change.
Yeah, you can never be, you can be the best salesperson, but you might be there for a nanosecond because then someone else has been able to perfect another skill that you didn't develop or you didn't learn that then puts them ahead. So the book that I've written is actually a workbook. It's quite big and it's available on the website online and there's worldwide delivery. But it's what it is, and this I purposely wrote it and published it like this. There are so many sales books and business books and all that out there that you can read and read and read and read and read. And they all tell you what you should do and, sort of some methodology, but they never, ever give you the how. So what this is it actually is how do you negotiate? How do you use these certain skills? And then each chapter has a development challenge. So it's interactive. So you need to fill out the challenges, the action items I have in there. So it's not just something you read, it's something you do. So it helps salespeople, business people develop those skills. And as people become leaders, regardless of whether you're selling something or not, you still need to have those sales skills. So I wanted it to be a book that people just didn't read. It was a workbook. They actually write in it. They scribble in it. They dog ear it. They take it with them wherever they go. They refer back to it. There is so much content in there and so much, there's so many challenges and exercises for people to do that can then be redone to keep developing and keep perfecting those skills until you do become one of the best salespeople in the world. And I call it, and my workshop is, a platform, a revolutionary platform to develop the best salespeople, because without these kinds of skills, it's really hard to perfect.
No, it is, and it's it was going to lead me on to the next question, but you've almost answered it. Because I was going to say, well, so is it because lots of people think, oh, it's an art, you're born with it, and I was going to ask you, is it an art or is it something that can be developed?
I mean, there is that old cliche of, you're born a salesperson. That actually is not true. What people are saying by that is you've got the gift of the gab, or that you're a great talker and you could talk underwater, or But what people don't realize is that's true, and you can talk underwater and you will sell something, but you'll sell it once and that's it. You will not sell twice, or you will not sell 100 times and you will not sell to that person for 10 years. So when they say, oh, you're a born salesperson, it's, you can actually obtain that's singular, a sale. Someone who develops and the skills and learns, so it's a learnt tool, and develops and keeps researching and exactly what you would say, what you mentioned before, Hakeem, about using the different skills and new, even technologies and resources around you, and bringing that into your armory. That's when you actually become a really, really good salesperson with depth of knowledge that will be, build sustainable relationships. So you won't be just selling the gift of the gab sale with that one. It will be 2, 3, 4. And I have, customers of mine or clients of mine that are 20 years, they're still with me. I'm continuing that sustainable relationship. So someone that says, oh, born a salesperson, will get that one sale and only that one sale.
You're obviously on the same quest as me, because that's been my quest for the past, 20 odd years, is that I used to find it very frustrating that people would say, oh, you can sell sand to the Arabs, you can, etc. And I'm thinking, well, yeah, I can talk, but sales isn't just about talking. I think there's a clear methodology that I go through, and I analyze. One of the first training courses I went on, then the sales process, the end of that sales process was a self-analysis. And I took that very much to heart, because I was analysing everything I did and saying, well, why was that successful and why was that one not successful? And you then start to build methodologies that become reproducible. You have a process, and then you start finding, oh, any environment I go into, I seem to be quite successful, whatever I'm selling, compared to other people, as you said, that are, they were great at selling that. We've now changed products and they can't sell that anymore because they haven't really got a process. And I've been very, very almost dogmatic about, no, I want to change the world to believe that sales and marketing is a discipline, just like accountancy, pharmacy, and there's rules and regulations that you should be utilizing to keep you on a successful path.
100%. One of the elements in the periodic table is diagnosing. It is really important that it's like diagnosing, and that comes obviously with my medical background, but it's diagnosing the problem. But it's not just diagnosing the problem of the customer, it's diagnosing how they want to be communicated. It's diagnosing who are the decision makers. Who is it that I need to influence within the group or the organization? So it's a very analytical. I talk about, diagnosing, then analyzing, maximizing, and optimizing. It's that framework of, you don't just go, oh, I'm going to sell it to that, and hopefully, that person, hopefully, just, think that it's going to be, easy. It's going to come easy, and just hope for the best. That is not sales. It is a difficult skill. Sales is not easy. If anyone says that sales is easy, it absolutely isn't. And if it has come easy to them, that's great, but it will be short-lived. Sales is a methodical art that needs to be perfected, constantly perfected, with different tools, different methodologies, different frameworks, and it needs to be broken down in a scientific way. If you can break it down into the building blocks and then identify what is needed, identify, what you've perfected, or, what you still need to improve, it's a dynamic environment. You can never ever stand still. And what makes the best salespeople are the people that continually grow, continually develop. They are great leaders, so they not only are looking out for themselves to better themselves, but they want to better their team. So great leaders create other great leaders, and that's by bringing people together and doing professional and personal development. It doesn't just stop there and say, right, you've reached the end, you've got, that you've hit the ceiling, that's it, no more. That is not how sales and business works. So the best salespeople are constantly moving, constantly learning, and the environment changes. Those that thought they were really, really good at sales are the ones that have now got lost in the virtual world. One of the modules I teach is selling in a virtual world, because we are communicating differently. we do have barriers. We have the screens in front of us, cameras in front of us. I mean, I'm looking at you. I mean, obviously we're at other ends of the world, but I right now, as we were saying off before we were recording, I'm in Sydney and I'm in a very heavy lockdown. I can't move 5 kilometers from my home, and I can only leave for 60 minutes. Now, that's very hard to do business. So we need to perfect the art of behavior and communication and selling and relationship selling online. And a lot of people really struggle with that. So we need to try and remove those barriers of the screen and the 1 centimeter diameter camera that I'm looking into right now.
Yeah.
Make sure that I'm connecting with you and you're connecting with me, which we are, but that needs to be taught. And so those that have thought that they were excellent salespeople and they perfected it all have now got lost.
That's a really good point, because communication, people think communication is just face-to-face communication, which obviously I think most people would say that's the best form of communication. It's certainly the most enjoyable form of communication, but communication is a variety. And actually, I had a business with a partner well ahead of its time, actually. So it didn't go that far. It was about 6 years ago where we started like a virtual business, as in virtual meetings, because we realized, I mean, we obviously didn't know what was going to happen with COVID, but we were thinking, actually, if you're working with global companies, they don't want to be sending people across the world.
Exactly.
So we actually perfected that, and we were actually running those virtual meetings so that we were managing the meeting, and we're trying to give them a face-to-face experience with the meeting. So we were doing breakout rooms well before Zoom had it, and actually we were relatively successful. Just it was a lot of hard work, because we realized the actual preparation you had to put in to prepare an online meeting was about 50 times more than actually just turning up and presenting to a group of people, because you're just bouncing off the energy in the room, aren't you, and assessing people as you go, as opposed to the preparation. But that has certainly helped me now, because I was already attuned to that online space before it happened in the last 2 years. So it's a very interesting point about the communication and people getting lost.
Well, I've been selling virtually, same with you, for nearly 20 years, because I have, working with, quite reputable principals globally. Exactly. You don't just hop on a plane and off you go. And back then, the platform that we used, because I used to do a lot of medical presentations with software. So we used to use WebEx. And it was quite clunky back then. It's obviously really, really good now. But what happened is you didn't have the tools that you have now. So, Zoom was around, but it was a very, very basic tool. Even WebEx wasn't really great. So you didn't have the stability of the platforms and the features that you needed to run a really smooth virtual sales process.
Yeah.
Now, that's all at our fingertips and quite reasonably priced. So those barriers to execution have been removed. It's just now understanding how to communicate when you are sitting in a room, looking at a tiny camera and trying to engage with someone that you aren't sitting next to. And there's lots of subliminal cues that you do miss, but there are certain characteristics, and as you and I are talking now and looking at one another, there are certain characteristics that I'm identifying with you and knowing how you want to be communicated to, and that just comes from being taught and learning.
Okay, so what lessons would you say you've learned over the years that others can benefit? If I say, give me the top 5, what would they be?
If in the virtual world or just in general?
Just in general, around communication, around sales.
Yep, sure. So firstly, I would say that you need to actively listen. You absolutely will not perfect sales or become successful if you're not listening to the customer. And I don't just mean out of sheer respect. I mean, there are things that when you don't actively listen, you miss important cues, you miss important topics or words that they've said that you need to pick up to be able to then carry on with that conversation. So that will be the first thing. The second thing is to be authentic. So you've got to be able to build up trust, and you need to have a presence. So if someone wants to divulge a lot of information. They feel that they can. If you build up a trusting relationship because of your authenticity, they are way more likely to give you a lot more information about themselves or about their problem or about what they need. Quite often, they will also bring up information about competitors without you, not that you should ask and you always stay professional, but it comes up in conversation because they feel they can trust you with this information. So authenticity and trust. Number 3 is persistence. Now, people need to realize that even though the most common word that we hear in sales is no, someone's had to say yes, otherwise no one would be doing business at all. So there's a yes in there somewhere. So I always say to my students and to my teams that, be persistent. When you're coming up against an obstacle or roadblock or a gatekeeper, I actually have my own sort of gatekeeper cycle, that if you decide and say, oh, I'm not going to pursue this anymore, well, you're the one that's giving yourself the no. At some stage, if you are, call it polite persistence, if you are politely persistent, persistence is also one of the elements in the periodic table, eventually you will get to where you need to be. Now, it may take a couple of extra weeks, it may take 12 months, but you are not doing yourself any favors by saying, right, that's it, I've had enough, I'm not doing any more. Now, if the sale is lost, that's different, but I'm talking about when you're prospecting, when you're engaging with a customer. You need to be persistent. Persistence pays off, but it's the way that you're persistent that matters. 4 leadership qualities. So you need to be able to show that you can lead a team, that you are confident in yourself, people that you are able to, I'm not going to say able to lead, but able to mentor and be a role model to others around you. Now, leadership comes with experience. It also depends on the industry that you're in, but in sales, showing those leadership or exhibiting those leadership qualities is something that is not only applicable, but very enlightening in a sales environment. If someone doesn't come across with leadership qualities, you are less likely for someone to engage, a customer to engage or do business with you. Now, what also quite often happens is you then also become a leader within the customer's organization because they end up saying, wow, that person's got a lot of experience, they've got a lot of expertise, their depth of knowledge is phenomenal. I want to be a part of that. I want them to be a part of our organization. I want to collaborate with them. So having those leadership qualities is really, really important. And what would be the 5th one? Opportunity, for sure. Opportunity actually sits everywhere. There's opportunity everywhere. Absolutely it is. Even when you feel that you're really down the dumps, like, oh my gosh, especially if you've lost a big deal, it's like, what could I have done better? There are always opportunities. It's just that sometimes we're blinkered. We need to look in the periphery. So we need to look around, pull those blinkers away and look around. As I say, think outside the box. The opportunities are there. We just can't see them. And it's important to know that if you are feeling despondent and feeling a little bit sort of lack of confidence and that you just, these things happen. Sales is a roller coaster. 1 minute you're high and up in the air, and the next minute you're, in the depths of the valley. That's just what sales is, but it's also exhilarating. That's what makes us tick. So when you are in the depths of the valley, know that there are opportunities, but what you need to make sure is that if the opportunities are there, you grab them. So it's like having a door that opens. If you don't step through that door, you will never, ever be able to reach that success or get an outcome because you're just standing on the edge. So our opportunities is a really important one.
And that last point actually is links back to your not the periodic table, but the periodic table and the book in terms of the mindset, because the opportunities being there and just how you describe it and you being able to see those opportunities is almost a lot of the time determined by mindset, because you can have 2 people, they're given exactly the same opportunity. One walk through that door because they've got the right mindset, and the other one So, oh, no. If I walk, oh, what's going to be on the other side of that door, and they don't walk through it, and therefore they don't get the opportunity. So it all links in really nicely. So in terms of, because we touched on it slightly there about the virtual selling. So have you got any top tips for communication in this virtual world?
The virtual world, yeah. So for so when you get online, it's really important that, like, right now, Hakeem, I am not looking at you on the screen. I am looking at the camera, because for me it is important that you can see me engaging with you. Remember, I said listening is with your eyes and with your body language. Now, I naturally use my hands. My background is Greek. I'm European, so and I am quite an extrovert, so my hands go all over the place. But so that's natural for me. But I'm not looking at the, so if now I've adjusted my eyes, and so I'm looking at you on the screen, but of course you can now see that I'm not looking at you.
Yeah.
So it's really important, as difficult as it is, and it just comes with practice, that you look at the camera to engage with your eyes and listen with your eyes, communicate with your eyes. The other thing is, if someone is a very uppity person, so a very more of a dominant and influential person. So if we think about 4 quadrants of the DISC profile, you've got the dominance, the influence, the steadiness, and the compliance. If someone's quite dominant or influential, bringing your body weight forward, like you're waiting for that next thing that they're going to say, because you're really, really intrigued and really interested, and you're hanging out for it. So bringing your body weight forward shows them that you are really engaged and you're connected, and also that you're listening, and they will continue talking and giving you more. If you have someone that is more introverted, they're a lot steadier. They're a calm person. They talk slowly. Then sit back in your chair, because quite often when you lean forward like this and transfer your weight forward, and this happens in the real world too, when you transfer your weight forward, it can be intimidating. So even though we have a screen and even though we have the camera in front of us, that movement forward shows that you are, to them, that you are pushy, that you are agitated, that you are trying to get more out of them. So you sit back and just give them the opportunity to be able to talk in. It's almost providing a psychological safe area, even though it's virtual area, but it's providing that space for them to be able to communicate, to talk, to do what they feel comfortable. And that goes also with the volume, the pitch, the speed of your voice. So similarly, with someone that is, like an I or a D and really, talks a lot, we can talk faster, we can talk louder, we can talk our cadence and our pitch and our tempo, we can, move that up and down. And that's to be able to engage or provide what I call conversational rhythm. And conversational rhythm, generally at the 3 to 4 minute mark, is when you start finding synergies within a person that you've connected with properly, and then that conversational rhythm just continues. If you are talking to someone that is quieter and a little bit steadier and calmer, then slow your voice down, slow your words down, lower your pitch. So I've just started speaking a little bit lower. I'm talking softer. I'm talking slower. And I'm not engaging in, not that I'm aggressive, but that coming across as that aggressive, pushy, because I'm sitting back, I'm talking slow, I'm listening, I'm giving them space. And that's just this is just touched the surface, some of the tips that you can use in the virtual world of business.
Excellent. Now, that's really, really useful, because you may have noticed I've started looking directly into the camera, because
I did notice it before. Yeah. I thought you lifted your eyes, yeah.
Because it's a really difficult skill to perfect, because, as you said, communication is about picking up those subtle cues. So you automatically want to look at the person that you're speaking to, and then, but you're right, when you're on a call, you don't want your eyes looking down to the left or down to wherever your camera is. You want to be looking into the camera, so the person is feeling connected with you. So I think that's certainly something I've just picked up, and I'll be certainly doing in all my podcasts, because I'm always thinking, well, where should I be looking? Because I know I want to look straight ahead, because that's where the camera is. I also want to look at Leanne because I'm speaking to her. So it is it's a really useful.
It really
Yeah.
is. 95% of people, there's been actually a study that came out, 95 to 96% of people do not look at the camera.
Yeah. Well, in fact, I was looking.
It goes to show how many people are not technically not truly engaging with the person that they're speaking to. And if that's a customer, especially a new customer, it's important to engage, and it will certainly differentiate you from everybody else.
Well, interesting enough, if you're in America, you're very lucky because I tried to get this because I knew it was a problem. There's this actual tool, well, I don't know what it is. It's like a Perspex webcam carrier. So it basically goes over your laptop or your computer, wherever you put it, and it sits right in the middle of the screen, so that actually you're almost then looking at the person as well as looking at the camera. So I was trying to get it, but you couldn't get it in America. So I keep looking online and try to find, well, there must be something in England, but I haven't found one yet. But that will then help me completely revolutionize my online presence, because then I can look directly in the camera. Because even though I'm looking at the camera, I'm like looking at the camera, but I keep wanting to look to the left to look at you again. So because obviously
what I do too, just when you said look at the left to look at me, so I have my Zoom screen off center, so I don't have the Zoom in the middle of my screen, so I'm at the edge, but I have you, so you are
in the okay
in front of me, but the screen's going that way. So rather than putting the Zoom screen in the middle, so you would then be in my peripheral vision on the left, I have you centered directly underneath the field of view, my camera. So when I'm looking at the camera, my peripheral vision can see your actions and your behavior.
Yes, I've just done it. So this is every day is a school day as far as I'm concerned, because lots of people say, well, why do you do all these podcasts? It's very, it's very time consuming. You have to do research. I said, well, firstly, I'm trying to provide knowledge and information to other people, but I said that the person who benefits the most from it is me. I said, because I'm speaking to all these great people who know a lot more about things than me, so I'm learning all the time every time I do a podcast, so all the time. So obviously you talked a bit about the book. What drove you to write that book? Because obviously I know that you're very enthusiastic about it. It's a workbook. It's going to help lots of people, but writing a book is not easy. I know that for a fact, because I tried to do it for about 10 years and only completed it last year. So what's the driving factor behind it?
Sure, and I not only did I write the book, but I actually did all the graphics as well. I did everything in it because I wanted it very specific in how it looked, even in terms of font size, because when it's a workbook, it needs to be easy for people to read and quickly, so they can skim if they need to go over their notes. So there's a lot of psychology that's actually gone into the aesthetics and the way that it looks, and also colors. Because when I talk about archetypes, so archetypes is the Jungian archetype. So I do a lot of work with archetypes. So Carl Jung was a student of Sigmund Freud, and he's a psychoanalyst and a psychiatrist. Yeah. And so using the certain colors that it would stimulate people to learn, but then not be overpowering either. So they're in a very calming space to learn. So a lot's gone into the book. The reason why I wanted to write it and I wrote it and publish it is because there is nothing else like it. There's nothing out there. So when I was researching, I found another sort of sales workbook that was, besides extraordinarily expensive, like hundreds of dollars, which is ridiculous, it's 11 years old and was about 90 pages. What's that going to give you? To me, that's just sort of like a notepad, very, very expensive notepad. There wasn't really a lot. It was very archaic, old school sales. And I didn't feel black and white. So there wasn't any thought in terms of archetypes and in terms of the aesthetics of the reader or the consumer. So I saw a hole in the market for, in regards to that. And I constantly get asked about my methodologies and my frameworks, because they are very different, but also very successful. So I thought, you know what, I'm actually going to put it in a book, and I'm going to make it something that people can use and use and use and use and use and develop and learn. So that's what sort of encouraged me to write it. Originally, it was just going to be for my own clients and my own students, the cohorts of the workshop and the business mastermind program. But I mean, I love sharing information, and I thought, why no? I need to get this out there. There are so many people that need this kind of development and skills, and so fully published it, and now it's available. Yeah.
So where can people get it from?
So on the website, so www.leanneelichconsulting.com.
I'll drop that link in the podcast when I release the podcast episode. So that's great. And what would you say if there was one thing that you want the people who read it to get from it? What would that be?
The one thing would be to understand the building blocks of sales and apply the scientific methodology to help build confidence in business.
So you put about 5 things in there, but wrapped it up as one.
Yeah. Also, what I do, what the team does, everyone that buys the book, I have the periodic table of sales card, and that also comes with the book as well.
Oh, excellent. So yeah, I'll be getting a few people to buy that book, but that certainly when I launch the podcast, this episode, then I'll put all of those links in the bottom, so people will be then able to get in contact with you, but also be able to buy the book, because I think that people, once they've watched this, will be very keen to learn about the periodic table, learn about the mindset and the skill set and the toolkit, etc. So just to wrap up, we were talking obviously about learning and moving forward. So what are you reading at the moment, or have you got any good books that you'd recommend to help people, apart from obviously your own, to help people understand communication, understand sales, etc.?
The one book in particular that I is an absolute go-to for me, I'll just get it, is, I mean, this is what, I mean, I have quite a few that I actually refer to constantly, but this one is the Robert Cialdini.
Oh, right, yes.
Psychology of Persuasion. He has the 6 principles of influence. That book, I mean, he's a genius.
Yeah.
And that book, the way he's broken it down is just phenomenal. The other book that I also have that is pretty much I refer to constantly is the conversational intelligence. So that's really, there's nothing like this around. And it really breaks down the way that we communicate, and also the barriers we put up ourselves to not understand someone properly. Like, for instance, if we judge, we create our own movies in our heads about what is happening or what a customer thinks. In the workshop, I talk a lot about limiting beliefs and challenging assumptions. 90% of assumptions that are made in sales are incorrect. We think, they're going to buy from our competitor. Well, how do you know that? Actually, I don't. We think that they're going to do it. We think that they know what we know. We think that a customer is not going to call back. We think that they're not interested because they haven't answered their emails. There's all these assumptions and all these movies that we have going on inside our heads that most of the time are incorrect. And conversational intelligence actually explains that, and how we should use a different part of our brain to be able to go think more positively than the immediate negative.
That's I appreciate that, and I want to thank you very, very much for joining me on the Hands-on Business podcast, Leanne Elich. That has been illuminating. I know it'll be illuminating for my listeners. And as I said, all the way through, all the links that we've talked about, the books that we've just mentioned, I'll drop those in the links when I launch the podcast. And obviously Leanne's website will be there, and so will the salesaccelerationformula.com, of course, because that's my website, and that's all about different aspects of growing business and growing a business. So I think that with all those links, then you will at least have a good starting point, that if you're not in sales, or you're trying to get into sales, or you're trying to improve your sales process, I think you'll have all of the tools then, and you won't be having an excuse as to why you're not going to be moving to be one of those top salespeople. So thank you very much, Leanne Elich.
You're welcome. Thank you for inviting me on the podcast. It's been great. I've just really enjoyed talking to you. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much.